You know, a prominent Rotten Tomatoes critic actually admitted recently, like out loud and in public, that glowing movie reviews are literally being bought.
Yeah, bought with VIP access, basically.
Right, so you check your phone, you see this shiny 90% score, you buy your ticket, and then 2 hours later, you're sitting in the dark realizing you have been entirely gaslit.
Totally gaslit. It's wild.
Today's deep dive pulls back the curtain on exactly how that happens. We're looking at a massive collision between studio access, modern influencer culture, and ultimately your trust as an audience member.
It's a profound shift, really, in how we consume information. We're talking about a system that has been operating quietly in the shadows for a long, long time, but now it's starting to fracture under its own weight, leaving consumers completely disoriented.
Now, just to keep our focus entirely on the core ideas today and, to avoid getting bogged down in internet drama, we're not going to be naming the specific commentators, channels, or critics who provided this analysis.
Right. No naming names today.
Yeah, we are just going to look at the explosive claims they're making in this recent industry commentary.
Okay.
Okay, let's unpack this. The inciting incident for this whole discussion is that an established Rotten Tomatoes critic went online and confessed that the entire review system relies on a quid pro quo.
A literal exchange.
Exactly. Studios provide access, and reviewers provide the marketing.
What's fascinating here is that audiences have suspected this for years, There's always been this lingering skepticism about overly enthusiastic press tours.
Oh, for sure.
But having an insider, someone who actively participates in this ecosystem, openly admit that the system is rigged, that fundamentally changes the dynamic.
It really does.
It takes this from the realm of like a bitter fan conspiracy theory and solidifies it as a confirmed business model.
And the source material details how this specific critic talked openly about manipulating their influence. The commentary notes how this critic, quote, squashifies the tomato meter.
Squashifies, such a crazy word.
I know, right? Which is such a visceral way to describe massaging a review aggregate. They also pointed out how this critic meticulously schedules their reviews.
Yeah, the scheduling thing is huge.
Like, for instance, they talked about timing their review for an upcoming Michael Jackson movie perfectly around the premiere dates. It wasn't about when they had formed a thoughtful opinion on the film's artistic merit,
No, not at all.
It was calculated entirely around maximizing their access to the premiere events.
It's pure logistics masquerading as journalism. They are optimizing for the algorithm of studio favor, honestly, not for the benefit of the reader or the viewer.
But wait, hasn't Hollywood always done this? I mean, press junkets, free swag, flying critics out to fancy hotels. That's been around since the 1950s.
Sure. Yeah.
Frank Sinatra probably got great write-ups because he bought the press corps martinis.
Yeah.
So why is this source arguing that this is suddenly a deceptive trap now?
Well, it's a fair question, but there is a massive structural difference between traditional press and the modern influencer class.
Okay, how so?
The traditional idea of a critic, someone standing apart from the industry, holding it to a standard of artistic accountability that was backed by an editorial desk, their primary value was their analytical rigor.
Right, they had a boss.
Exactly. But this commentary points out that the lines between critics and influencers have completely blurred. Influencers don't really analyze art. They cultivate parasocial trust with their audience.
I see.
And for studios, that parasocial trust is infinitely easier to monetize and control.
So you're saying they aren't actually functioning as critics anymore. They're just an extension of the marketing department.
You are unpaid, or, well, indirectly paid PR. Whether you call yourself a critic or a content creator in this specific Hollywood ecosystem, your primary function is to influence the audience in favor of the studio's product.
Which brings us to how this bribery actually functions. Because it's rarely a briefcase full of cash slid across a table in a dark parking garage.
No, the currency is much more subtle than that.
The commentators detail the mechanics of this hidden economy. It's the premiere invites. It's standing on the red carpet holding the nice little glasses of champagne.
Right, the nice little glasses.
Yeah, and it's the exclusive tchotchkes they send to your house so you can do a viral unboxing video. But most importantly, it's the exclusive interview access.
That's the real gold mine.
Exactly. You get 5 minutes with the lead actress of a massive blockbuster. You post that interview, and it guarantees you 1 million views on your channel.
And this is the crucial distinction from the old days of Hollywood press. The studio isn't paying them directly, right? They are granting the influencer the raw materials to mine their own gold on YouTube or TikTok.
So the access is the product.
Yes, the premier access is the inventory for their digital storefront. 1 million views translates directly into ad revenue and sponsorships for that creator. So they hand them the inventory, but, and this is the underlying mechanism of the trap, that inventory comes with heavy, unspoken conditions.
Let's talk about those conditions. If an influencer goes to one of these premieres, watches the movie, and then goes home and publishes a video saying, honestly, this movie sucked, what actually happens?
They get blacklisted instantly.
Wow, instantly.
Yeah, they're cut off from the PR list. And for an influencer whose entire business model relies on being first with exclusive content, losing access means losing their livelihood.
Right, because there's no backup plan.
Exactly. No access means no interviews, no premieres, no content. It is quite literally the death of their channel. Therefore, they are financially incentivized, forced, really, to like everything the studio puts in front of them.
Now, you might be listening to this thinking, well, I don't care about red carpet influencers. I just look at the aggregate score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Right.
But the source points out how this actually corrupts the underlying math of the sites you use. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because these influencers can't just give a standing ovation to a certified disaster without looking completely ridiculous to their own audience.
Yeah, the audience would see right through it.
Exactly. The source material highlights how they desperately try to navigate this when a movie is genuinely, objectively bad.
Right. They can't say it's bad, so they give it what the commentators call a tepid thumbs up.
A tepid thumbs up.
Yeah. They'll score it a safe 7 out of 10. They'll focus on, like, the visual effects or the costume design, just doing whatever it takes to stay in the studio's good graces without entirely alienating their viewers.
But the way Rotten Tomatoes works is a binary system. It's either fresh or rotten.
Right.
A glowing 10 out of 10 is fresh.
Yeah.
But a terrified, totally compromised 7 out of 10 is also fresh.
Yep.
So if you have 100 influencers all terrified of losing their VIP access, they all give a terrible movie a safe 7. The algorithm processes that, and suddenly a mediocre disaster is sitting at a 95% fresh rating.
It mathematically breaks the system.
It totally does.
It completely bankrupts the concept of a review aggregate. And it brings us directly back to you, the listener. Think about how this hidden economy shifts your own trust. When you understand that a glowing review, or even a mildly positive one, is quite literally the price of admission to the VIP party, how much is that review actually worth to you?
So if the system is rigged to constantly produce these artificially high scores and everybody's playing along to keep their paychecks, why is the entire ecosystem suddenly collapsing right now?
Well, that's where the content itself comes in.
Right. The commentators in our source point to a specific creative shift in the major studios. Now, to be clear, we are not taking a side in the cultural debate here.
No, not at all.
We just need to look at their argument impartially to understand why this influencer ecosystem ultimately fractured.
The commentators present a distinct causal link. They argue that major studios, and they specifically call out Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, and Star Trek, stopped prioritizing good storytelling.
Okay.
The claim is that these franchises substituted compelling narratives with ideology, propaganda, and a corporate mandate for, quote, representation.
And the source uses a very specific example to illustrate how this shift was weaponized against reviewers. The marketing for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show.
Yeah, that was a huge flashpoint.
According to the commentary, the marketing for that series intentionally bypassed what should have been the biggest selling point.
Which was Hayden Christensen coming back as Darth Vader.
Exactly. The highly anticipated return of Darth Vader. Instead, the source argues that the studio chose to center the conversation around racial grievance and the actress Moses Ingram.
And the mechanism here is crucial to understand. The source argues that by making the marketing primarily about social issues rather than the story, the studios essentially created a human shield out of the cast.
A human shield?
Yeah. If an influencer or a critic comes out and criticizes the show's writing, the pacing, or the directing, the studio and the PR apparatus can instantly accuse them of attacking the actress or being on the wrong side of a social issue.
Wow, so it weaponizes the influencer's fear of being canceled against their fundamental duty to review the show honestly.
Precisely. As long as these massive franchises were generally crowd-pleasing, it was easy to give them a glowing review, collect your premiere tickets, and nobody noticed the quid pro quo.
Right, because everyone liked the movie anyway.
Exactly. But the commentators argue that as these franchises became, in their words, unwatchable, it created a crisis for the influencer class. When the audience violently rejected these new creative directions, the influencers were trapped.
They were faced with a brutal A-B choice. Choice A, tell the truth, align with the audience's massive negative reaction, and get permanently kicked out of the studio club.
Which means losing their job. Or choice B, defend media that the audience strongly dislikes, keep your VIP access and your red carpet photos, but completely lose the trust of your viewers.
And the commentators note that many influencers panicked and chose choice B.
They did.
They tried to shield the studios by focusing on the exact same talking points the PR departments were handing out. But the audience saw right through it. They recognized that the influencers were reading off a script, and the parasocial trust we talked about earlier just evaporated.
Which brings up a really vivid anecdote from the source material that perfectly captures this feeling of extreme manufactured PR.
Oh, the Adam Savage story.
Yes. They discuss a promotional event for The Mandalorian. They describe seeing Adam Savage, the legendary prop builder from Mythbusters, who is a massive, genuine fan, getting to sit in the cockpit of the Razor Crest ship alongside Grogu.
Which is a moment of pure, authentic joy for a guy who has spent his entire life loving practical effects and space fantasy.
Yes, exactly. But the source points out that surrounding Adam Savage were all these random influencers who had also been flown in by the PR team. And these influencers clearly didn't care about the craftsmanship or the legacy of the show. They were just there to film their 15-second clip for clout. The commentator noted that seeing that completely deflated the magic of the moment. It exposed the entire thing as a manufactured PR campaign, specifically designed to confuse the audience about the quality of the product by drowning them in a sea of fake, enthusiastic noise.
The source actually brings up the marketing campaign for the Rings of Power as another example of this.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The studios flew in squads of influencers that the core audience of Tolkien fans didn't even recognize, just to blast out generic positivity and drown out any organic criticism.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are witnessing is the rapid rise of the authenticity economy. Audiences are suffering from profound fatigue.
They're just so tired of it.
They are sick and tired of everything being fake. They are exhausted by the sponsored posts, the curated red carpet selfies, and the carefully rehearsed talking points designed to shield mediocre writing. The audience's bullshit detector has never been more sensitive.
Which is exactly why the source material heavily praises a new breed of independent reviewers. These are creators who are drawing massive audiences precisely because they've refused to play the studio game.
It's refreshing.
It is. They actively reject brand deals. They proudly state that they pay their own ticket prices, they buy their own popcorn buckets, and they do not accept free flights to premieres.
Because that independence is their entire selling point. They're proving to the audience that their opinion hasn't been bought.
Right.
They are trading studio access for audience loyalty, and in the current authenticity economy, audience loyalty is actually a much more stable and lucrative currency than a free glass of champagne.
The commentators point out that because the traditional review system has been so heavily weaponized with bought and paid-for influencer praise, platforms like Rotten Tomatoes are becoming, in their words, a useless tool.
Completely useless.
If you can't trust the aggregate score because the inputs are rigged by terrified influencers giving safe sevens, the entire site loses its function.
And nature abhors a vacuum. Because the traditional metrics are failing, the source notes the rise of alternative platforms. They specifically mention a website called Criticus, which is designed to operate completely outside the traditional Hollywood ecosystem, actively rejecting the shill reviews and trying to provide a metric that hasn't been manipulated by the PR machine.
So what does this all mean? We have a massive Hollywood machine that relies on an influencer class that has entirely lost its credibility. We have an audience that is migrating toward independent voices. Will Hollywood ever look at the declining trust, wake up, and admit that this system is broken and that their beloved franchises are damaged?
The source material offers a deeply cynical but historically accurate verdict. No.
Just a flat no.
Hollywood, as an institution, will never admit to playing a part in this decline. That is simply not how corporate structures operate. The commentators argue that the industry's default setting is to never admit a foundational philosophy is flawed, but instead to always blame the last guy who was in charge. They will restructure, they will fire an executive, but they won't admit the core creative direction failed.
The commentators point out that instead of dealing with reality, Hollywood relies on a cycle of excuses to completely ignore bad reviews and audience rejection.
Yeah, always looking for a scapegoat.
The source brings up how the industry frequently points the finger at external villains to explain away failure. They claim that concepts like Russian bots or organized review bombing, and they specifically cite the reaction to The Last Jedi here, are vastly overstated by the industry.
Oh, absolutely.
The argument is that studios blow these phenomena out of proportion to cover up a much simpler, more painful fact. Large portions of the audience just genuinely didn't like the films.
It's a defense mechanism. If the failure of a film is the result of a shadowy conspiracy of internet trolls, the studio executives don't have to reflect on their own storytelling choices.
Makes sense from their perspective, I guess.
Sure, but this raises an important question, and it really highlights the supreme irony of this entire situation. By forcing these influencers to pretend everything was fine, by demanding fake positivity, weaponizing social issues, and demanding they attack the fans who didn't like the movies, Hollywood didn't actually save their franchises.
They just alienated the audience faster.
Exactly. All they accomplished was destroying the credibility of the very influencer class they spent millions of dollars building up. They burned their own marketing apparatus to the ground just to survive a few bad opening weekends.
It's incredibly short-sighted. Think about the journey we've just tracked today. We've gone from an era where a critic's word was trusted artistic guidance to a system where an influencer is basically a hostage to their own premier access. To now, a landscape where authenticity is the rarest and most valuable currency in media. The veil has slipped. When a Rotten Tomatoes critic publicly admits they are trading access for positive scores, the gig is officially up.
The gig is definitely up.
The access journalism ecosystem is collapsing because the audience simply refuses to play along anymore.
And that leaves us in a really fascinating and honestly somewhat precarious transitional period for media consumption, which brings me to a final thought for you to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this entire deep dive talking about human influencers being compromised by the promise of premier tickets and swag, but we are rapidly entering an era of generative AI.
Oh, wow. Yeah, where does that fit into this?
Well, think about the mechanics we just discussed. If an AI can be prompted to write a perfectly plausible 7 out of 10 studio-friendly review in 3 seconds.
Which it absolutely can.
Right. And human influencers are already just reading studio-mandated talking points to keep their VIP access. What is the functional difference between the two?
That's a great question.
If the human element has already been stripped of its honesty to feed the algorithm, how long until the only movie recommendation you actually truly trust is the one from the friend sitting right next to you on the couch?
Man, that is a chilling thought. We really are circling right back to the beginning. You're standing in that theater lobby, and the only score that matters isn't the aggregate percentage on your phone, it's whatever the person next to you says.
Exactly.
It really makes you rethink every piece of marketing, every red carpet photo, and every early review you see online, which aligns perfectly with the underlying ethos of the commentary we reviewed today. Keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep asking hard questions about the media you consume. Thanks for diving deep with us.